In the opulent black-tiled lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel, where the air whispered of wealth and secrets, a young maid named Zoe found herself at a crossroads. Amidst the gleam of marble and the soft murmur of affluent guests, her cell phone pierced the silence, a summons that could alter the course of her life. Usually she adhered strictly to rule number one, no personal calls during work hours, a mandate from manager Richards, particularly for those in her position. Yet this was no ordinary call. It was from the university, and after 6 heart-wrenching rejections for her master's in linguistics, this could be her moment of redemption. One moment, she whispered to herself, her voice barely a breath as she concealed herself behind a grand ornate column. Her life hung in the balance as she answered, Zoe Johnson, with a voice just above a whisper, praying not to draw attention from the bustling guests. The voice on the other end was crisp and clear, speaking in perfect Dutch. It was Professor Van Hachten from the University of Amsterdam. Zoe's response flowed in kind, her pronunciation flawless, discussing the intricacies of her application for the international program. My motivatiebrief had twee weken geleden verzonde moeten zijn. She explained, her voice tinged with concern over the missing letter of motivation. Suddenly, the world around her fell silent. Glancing up, she met the astonished gaze of Richard Coleman, the billionaire magnate of the hotel chain, his expression one of surprise. Beside him stood manager Richards, her eyes aflame with fury. Zoe's heart sank. Ik moet gaan. Ik bel je later, she murmured hurriedly in Dutch, ending the call. Johnson, my office now? Manager Richards' voice sliced through the tension. The journey to the small administrative office in the basement felt like a descent into another world, each step echoing with the silent judgments of her colleagues. At 29, Zoe stood on the precipice of a life-altering decision, her dreams and duties colliding in the heart of the Grand Plaza Hotel. In the sterile environment of the hotel's cleaning department, Zoe Johnson stood out like a rare gem, the only black woman with a college degree, a fact that manager Richards seemed to conveniently overlook. You know the rules, Johnson, Richards barked, his voice echoing through the corridor as soon as Zoe closed the door behind her. No phones during working hours, especially not in common areas. His words sliced through the air, sharp and unyielding. Zoe's heart sank as she corrected him, her voice barely a whisper. It was Dutch, not French. But why did it matter? The language of her conversation was irrelevant to Richards. What stung was his disdain. I don't care if it was Martian. What matters is Mr. Coleman, the hotel owner, saw a cleaner neglecting her duties, chatting on the phone in the lobby. The hypocrisy was palpable. The white receptionist often indulged in personal calls without a second glance. Yet Zoe felt the weight of injustice burn through her like corrosive acid. Richards' punishment was swift and cruel. I'm assigning you to the convention center bathrooms for the next 3 months. There you can speak as many languages as you like without bringing shame to the hotel. The convention center, a place of relentless work and no overtime, was his favorite tool of retribution. As Zoe's world tilted, her stomach plummeted, knowing the grueling shifts that awaited her. That night, in the quiet confines of her shared apartment, Zoe's tears fell silently. She gazed at her framed linguistics degree and international certificates, symbols of her aspirations, now mocking her from the peeling wall. 6 years of scrubbing floors and polishing surfaces, all while nurturing dreams of further education and sending out resumes that seemed to vanish into the void after in-person interviews. The next morning, with a resolve steeled by adversity, Zoe arrived early, her professionalism a shield against the unfairness she faced. Just as she settled into her new routine, the front desk phone shattered the silence. Zoe Johnson, HR wants you immediately. The HR department, a domain of the elite, lay on the top floor next to the executive suites, a place Zoe had never ventured. What could this mean? The unknown beckoned, a mix of dread and curiosity swirling within her as she made her way upstairs. In the elevator, Zoe felt as invisible as ever, surrounded by executives engrossed in discussions of million-dollar mergers, their eyes gliding over her without the slightest hint of recognition. As soon as she stepped into the HR office, Johnson, with a grave expression, beckoned her to sit. "Please take a seat," he said, his voice laced with an urgency that made Zoe's heart sink. She sat stiff and braced for what she presumed would be her termination. The HR director's next words, however, threw her into a whirl of confusion. "Mr. Coleman has requested a meeting with you," he announced, leading her down the hall to an office that dwarfed her modest apartment. At 45, Richard Coleman was a legend, renowned for resurrecting bankrupt hotels into opulent sanctuaries. Now his piercing gaze was fixed on her. "Dutch, French, Italian, and Mandarin, correct?" Coleman's voice was direct, his eyes flicking to an open folder on his desk. Zoe blinked, bewildered. "How did you get my resume?" she managed to ask, her voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I asked HR for it as soon as I heard you yesterday," he replied, his tone revealing a keen interest. "Honors degree in linguistics from Georgetown. Fluent in 6 languages, 2 of them Asian, and you've been cleaning my hotel for 6 years." Zoe was unaware that this moment was meticulously orchestrated. What no one in the hotel suspected was that behind that seemingly innocuous phone call in Dutch lay a story of profound significance, an unexpected connection that would not only alter Zoe's trajectory, but unveil a systemic prejudice that had cloaked remarkable talent under the guise of cleaning uniforms and mops. For a moment, the office fell into a profound silence. Zoe stood, her mind racing, processing the revelation that Richard Coleman knew her, truly knew her, beyond the invisible figure she had always been in the corridors of the hotel. 6 years, Coleman murmured, closing the file, his voice echoing with a weight that spoke of missed opportunities and now perhaps a chance for redemption. As he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with an air of thoughtful inquiry, Coleman posed the question, "May I ask why a Georgetown-educated linguist is relegated to cleaning my bathrooms rather than engaging in international translations?" Zoe inhaled deeply, steadying herself before responding. "I've sent 47 resumes to the International Relations Department of this hotel, all met with silence. I've attempted an internal transfer 12 times, each request denied by Manager Richards and Mr. Whitmore, the Director of Operations." Coleman jotted down the names with a poker face, his mind clearly racing. It was curious indeed. Whitmore often lamented the dearth of multilingual staff, especially when it came to hosting Asian conferences. What Coleman didn't voice was his own growing suspicion, sparked by a discreet investigation into the alarming turnover rates of qualified non-white employees at his East Coast hotels just 3 months prior. "Zoe, let me be candid," Coleman said, his voice firm yet inviting. "Tomorrow we kick off a trade conference with Dutch and Chinese business executives. I need someone who not only speaks both languages fluently, but understands the subtle dance of cultural nuances. And you expect me to clean their rooms?" Zoe countered, her voice laced with a biting sarcasm that couldn't be concealed. A brief smile flickered across Coleman's face. "On the contrary, I want you to serve as our international relations coordinator for this event temporarily. The salary, $5,000 a week starting today." Zoe's purse nearly slipped from her grasp, the offer more than she typically made in 3 months. "Why me?" she asked, bewildered. "There are hundreds of qualified candidates out there." "Because," Coleman leaned forward, his gaze intense, "I've heard you speak Dutch like a native. You possess the qualifications I desperately need. And I suspect there's something profoundly amiss within my company." An hour later, Zoe found herself stepping into the elevator, a new badge in hand, granting her full access to the hotel systems. En route to HR to finalize her paperwork, she encountered Manager Richards. The shock etched on the woman's face was a sight to behold. "Johnson, what are you doing on this floor without a uniform working?" Ms. Richards stammered, her authority faltering. "Ms. Richards," Zoe replied, her voice steady with newfound authority, "international relations." In the midst of the bustling hotel, Zoe Coleman found herself at the center of an unexpected storm. She was abruptly summoned by Mr. Richards, the coordinator, who, at the behest of Mr. Coleman, had a visibly pale and flustered expression. "Impossible," he declared. "You lack the qualifications for Georgetown." Yet Zoe, ever poised, countered with a calm, "I am fluent in 6 languages, including Mandarin and Dutch." Her voice carried a professional edge as she reminded him, "My resume has been in the hotel's files for 6 years, along with 12 transfer requests." As the manager stumbled through his explanations, Zoe continued on her path. In the HR department, she encountered an unexpected ally, Zoe Williams, a newly hired recruitment analyst whose enthusiasm was palpable. "Zoe, finally, I saw your file when I started 3 months ago." Zoe Williams confided, her eyes bright with intrigue. "I couldn't fathom why someone of your caliber was relegated to housekeeping." She shared her futile attempt to discuss the matter with Whitmore, who had dismissed her instantly. That very afternoon, as Zoe prepared for an international conference in the VIP room, a troubling realization dawned on her. The event documents were riddled with incorrect translations in Mandarin, which could spark diplomatic misunderstandings with the Chinese executives. With swift action, she corrected the errors, meticulously redesigning the welcome materials. "How did you know they were wrong?" Coleman inquired, his presence at the doorway unnoticed until now. "The previous translation used terms offensive in formal corporate Chinese." Zoe elucidated, her voice firm yet composed. "Whoever translated this knows the basics, but not the cultural nuances." Coleman, his face thoughtful, nodded in agreement. "Whitmore assured me he hired the best translators. It cost a fortune." "He hired someone without checking their credentials." Zoe corrected, her finger tracing a critical error in the translation of a partnership proposal. The following day, the conference commenced. Zoe moved with an elegance that seemed almost otherworldly, effortlessly switching between Dutch and Mandarin, smoothing over conversations, and forging connections that would typically require days. During a brief intermission, she was approached by Whitmore, the director of operations, his demeanor a mix of curiosity and scrutiny. In the grand ballroom, the air was thick with the scent of intrigue and the faint hum of whispered conversations. Zoe Johnson, now standing before Mr. Whitmore, the man who had never deigned to address her in 6 long years, felt the weight of their shared history. His smile was a facade, not reaching the cold depths of his eyes. "Miss Johnson, I must say I am impressed." He began, his voice dripping with a feigned warmth. "Richards clearly underestimated your potential." Whitmore continued, his words a thin veil over his discomfort. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore," Zoe replied, her tone composed, yet carrying an undercurrent of steel. "It's rather telling how my resume, which clearly states my fluency in Mandarin, was overlooked, especially when the hotel squandered $50,000 on translation services for this very conference." Whitmore's smile faltered a crack in his mask of indifference. "There must be some misunderstanding. I never received. I received confirmation of receipt for every email over the past 6 years." Zoe interjected, her voice calm but firm, "including those pointing out the critical errors in translations for our Asian events." What Zoe didn't voice was her access to the translation contract records, revealing a company owned by Whitmore's niece, a novice in formal Mandarin, yet charging rates fit for an expert. More damning were the consistent errors in translations that could have cost the hotel millions in lost business. As the conference unfolded into its third day, an unexpected recognition sparked. A Dutch businessman, his face lighting up with recognition, approached Zoe. "Wait, aren't you the student who wrote that brilliant article on linguistic variation in international business?" Surprised, Zoe confirmed, "Yes, that was me. I've cited your work at 2 conferences." The man exclaimed, calling his colleagues over with a mix of excitement and admiration. Coleman, watching from the sidelines, noted Whitmore's increasing unease. What the director didn't grasp was that while he smiled and conversed, Zoe was masterfully weaving a narrative that would not only expose isolated mistakes, but unveil a system of institutionalized discrimination and corruption. This system had suppressed talents like hers while funneling inflated contracts to the unqualified. Unbeknownst to the attendees at the Grand Plaza Hotel, the black cleaning lady who answered a call in Dutch wasn't there by mere chance. Behind this seemingly mundane department transfer, a calculated plan was unfolding, setting the stage for revelations that would shake the very foundations of the hotel's operations. The question was no longer whether Zoe could unveil the truth, but how shattering its revelation would be. As dawn broke on the fourth day of the conference, the Grand Plaza Hotel was alive with a palpable energy. Zoe's initiative had birthed preliminary contracts that soared beyond all expectations. Yet as she navigated through the bustling lobby, a sight sent a chill down her spine. There was Whitmore leading a visibly anxious young woman toward the executive elevators. "Miss Whitmore, your Mandarin translation is adequate," he murmured in a voice as controlled as a seasoned conductor. "There's no need for concern." Zoe's heart skipped a beat upon hearing the surname. The young woman clutched a folder labeled Final Translation Master Contract. A fleeting glance as they passed was all Zoe needed. The same glaring errors from before still marred the document. This was no coincidence. "Mr. Coleman needs to see this," Zoe thought, her steps quickening towards the CEO's office. Coleman was deep in paperwork when Zoe burst in unannounced. "Zoe, what's going on?" he asked, looking up, his brow furrowed with concern. With urgency in her voice, Zoe explained, "Whitmore is replacing my correct translations with flawed versions by her niece." She thrust her phone towards him, showing damning screenshots. "And I have proof this has been happening for years." Coleman's chair screeched as he stood abruptly. "Are you absolutely sure?" His voice was a mix of disbelief and anger. "I have everything documented," Zoe confirmed. "Moreover, I found records of inflated payments to her translation company 3 times above market rate, while qualified candidates like me were systematically turned away." As their conversation intensified, Zoe from HR rushed in breathless. "Mr. Coleman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you must see this immediately," she said, her voice trembling as she handed over a thick folder. "Hiring records for the last 5 years. There's a consistent pattern of rejecting qualified non-white candidates, especially women." Coleman's face turned to stone as he flipped through the documents, each page painting a clearer picture of the systemic discrimination that had been festering beneath the surface. The outside world, so vibrant and oblivious, had no idea of the storm brewing within these walls. The investigation had unearthed something, but this was systematic. Just then, Whitmore burst into the office unannounced, slicing through the conversation like a knife. "Richard, the Dutch are ready to sign, but they're raising flags about inconsistencies in the translations," he declared, his voice tinged with urgency. "Johnson must have botched it." The silence that fell was as cold as an Arctic wind. Coleman, with measured steps, walked over to the door and shut it with a firm click. "Thomas, I've been looking at payment records. $50,000 for shoddy translations while our qualified staff scrubbed toilets." Coleman's voice was dangerously calm, each word like a drop of ice water. "Any explanations?" Whitmore paled visibly. I don't know what you're talking about. We hire the best." Her niece, Thomas Coleman, stepped in, her experience in formal Mandarin as thin as a shadow. "She has a certification," she insisted, "but it was as fake as a $3 bill." Zoe, with a quiet grace, placed a printed email on the table. "I've just confirmed with Peking University. They've never certified Ashley Whitmore." Whitmore shot Zoe a look that could curdle milk. "You're nobody," he sneered. "A cleaning lady playing with the big boys." "Actually, I hold a PhD in applied linguistics from Georgetown," Zoe corrected, her voice unwavering. "And I have 6 international publications, all documented in your HR files, where you've consistently overlooked my qualifications." Thomas Coleman interjected, her tone sharp as a guillotine. "I've called an emergency board meeting in 30 minutes. By then, I expect her resignation letter on my desk." "You can't be serious." Whitmore laughed, a nervous edge to his voice. "Choose your next words with extreme care," Coleman warned, her gaze steely. 2 hours later, the executive auditorium was a sea of faces, all managers, supervisors, and directors summoned in haste. In the front row, Dutch and Chinese business executives waited, curiosity painted on their faces. Richards, the cleaning manager, looked bewildered, sandwiched between other department heads. Coleman took the stage, Zoe by his side, the air charged with anticipation. "Today we uncovered a systematic scheme of discrimination and nepotism that has cost this company millions," he announced, his voice echoing with grave seriousness. "For years, managers like Thomas Whitmore and Sarah Richards have operated under the radar, implementing policies that are not only unethical, but detrimental to our company's integrity. As the auditorium lights dimmed, Coleman's voice carried a mix of disappointment and resolve, revealing the grim realities behind the polished facade of their corporate culture. Policies that have not only tarnished the spirit of our workforce, but have also eaten away at our profits. He declared, his words slicing through the silence. Behind him, a presentation unfolded, its stark visuals painting a tale of disparity charts, showcasing the stark contrast between employee qualifications and their roles, skewed hiring statistics by race and gender, and the exorbitant costs of contracts tied to managers' family members. Amidst this revelation, a beacon of integrity shone through. Ms. Johnson, whom many of you might have overlooked as just a cleaning lady, has this week saved us from a diplomatic and financial catastrophe. Coleman continued, his voice tinged with admiration. Her timely correction of translations averted a contractual misunderstanding that would have cost us millions. The Asian businessman in the audience nodded, his recognition palpable, followed by a ripple of quiet applause. The atmosphere shifted as Coleman announced the repercussions of the investigation. Thomas Whitmore has been dismissed for cause, he stated, his tone firm. Sarah Richards is currently suspended pending further investigation into her involvement. And effective immediately, we will undertake a thorough audit of all hiring and promotions from the last 5 years. The room absorbed the news in stunned silence, Richard's face a mask of pallor and shock. Then, in a moment of unexpected joy, Coleman's face softened. I am delighted to announce that Dr. Zoe Johnson has been appointed as our new Global Director of Internal Communications, overseeing our multilingual operations. The auditorium burst into applause, a mix of tentative and fervent, with the cleaning crew at the back, their eyes glistening with pride. As Zoe exited the stage, she caught a glimpse of Whitmore, his expression twisted in a silent fury as he was led away by security. His parting words, a venomous whisper, "You won't last a month," only met with Zoe's serene smile. In her blazer pocket lay the recording device, a silent witness to every threat and racist remark Whitmore had uttered in his desperate attempts to conceal his misdeeds. Later that night in her new office, with its panoramic city view, Zoe allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, her tears a testament to the weight of her newfound responsibilities and the journey that lay ahead. Those were not tears of sorrow, but of profound release, marking the end of 6 long years of mopping floors, while her true capabilities were dismissed. 6 years of hearing, "Your resume must have been misplaced, and perhaps you're not quite the cultural fit we need." With trembling hands, she reached for the phone, dialing her mother, who had sacrificed all to fund her education. "I did it, Mom," she whispered, her voice quivering with emotion. Unbeknownst to the patrons and staff of the Grand Plaza Hotel, a profound transformation was just beginning to unfold. While some executives were still reeling from the shock of seeing their old privileges crumble, others were awakening to a stark, undeniable truth. When genuine talent finally breaks free, it not only rectifies past wrongs, but reshapes the very fabric of the future. The downfall of Whitmore and his discriminatory practices was but the opening act in a sweeping overhaul that would rattle the very foundations of not just this hotel, but the entire American hospitality sector. And it all began with a seemingly innocuous phone call in Dutch. 6 months had elapsed since that pivotal moment when Zoe answered a call in Dutch in the lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. What started as a solitary act of personal justice had blossomed into a silent revolution sweeping through the industry. Now, Zoe's office on the 32nd floor offered a breathtaking view over all of Manhattan. A subtle plaque on the oak door simply read, Dr. Zoe Johnson, Vice President of Diversity and International Relations. Her salary was in the 5 figures monthly, not annually, yet the true essence of her power extended far beyond mere titles or financial rewards. "Restructuring committee assembled and waiting," announced Zoe, now her executive assistant and closest confidant. "All regional managers are on the conference call." Zoe nodded, inhaling deeply before stepping into the conference room where Richard Coleman and the board of directors awaited. What could possibly come next in this tale of resilience and reform? The answer lay in the hands of those about to make history, not just in the hotel industry, but in the broader narrative of justice and equality. The day of reckoning had arrived, a moment etched in time when the final presentation of the Invisible Talents program was unveiled. It was a project close to Zoe's heart, a beacon of hope designed to spotlight those employees who had been unjustly shrouded in the shadows of the hotel chain. The room buzzed with anticipation as she stepped forward, her voice brimming with pride. The results of our pilot program have not just met, but soared beyond all our wildest dreams. She declared, her eyes gleaming with passion as she revealed the statistics on the screen. In a mere 6 months, they had unearthed 147 gems hidden within the organization, individuals proficient in languages, finance management, and technology, yet confined to roles beneath their true potential. A staggering 83% of these overlooked talents hailed from minority groups, Black, Latino, and others. Coleman, his eyes reflecting a mixture of approval and satisfaction, nodded. This program wasn't just about rectifying his own situation. It was about reshaping the very fabric of the system. But the most awe-inspiring aspect, Zoe continued, was the financial transformation. Our costs for outsourced translations have plummeted by 78%, she exclaimed, her voice rising with excitement. International customer satisfaction has leaped 42% higher, and our diversity ratings now lead the industry, all this while fostering genuine growth opportunities for those already within our ranks. Far away in a modest hotel in California, Sarah Richards watched the broadcast with a heavy heart. Her career had taken a downward spiral after a thorough investigation, trading her former authority for the anonymity of laundry management. Every day was a stark reminder of her past mistakes, a daily penance for her prejudices. Zoe's vision for this future was equally compelling. The next phase, she explained with a radiant smile, will introduce an internal mentoring system. Each talent we elevate will pledge to scout and nurture others with potential. Meanwhile, Thomas Whitmore, once a titan in the industry, was conspicuously absent from the celebration. His reputation was now a cautionary tale, his name synonymous with discrimination and financial misconduct. The last whispers placed him at the helm of a roadside motel in Arizona, a shadow of his former glory. His niece Ashley had to return all her ill-gotten gains, her dreams of easy wealth shattered. In her heartfelt address, Zoe turned to the camera, her voice carrying the weight of years of silent struggles and unacknowledged dreams. I want to share something deeply personal, she began, her eyes glistening with emotion. She paused, allowing the silence to envelop the room, a poignant reminder of the moments her mother must have felt in the quiet corners of a similar hotel. When I was just a child, Zoe continued, her voice steady but tender. My mother toiled as a maid in a hotel much like this one. Despite her college education, she never found her place in the field she studied. Yet she instilled in me a truth that has carried me through life. Zoe, no matter how much they try to make you feel invisible, your worth is not measured by their recognition. With a deep breath, Zoe composed herself, her gaze unwavering. My mother passed away believing that certain doors would forever remain closed to people like us. But here I stand before you, proving that her sacrifices were not in vain. Her words echoed through the room, touching the hearts of the executives, many of whom had been recently elevated through the same program that had transformed Zoe's life. Discreetly, they wiped away tears, moved by the realization of their own potential, unleashed not by their roles but by the opportunities provided. The true essence of a company, Zoe declared, her voice rising with passion, is not in its profits, but in the potential it liberates. But for decades, the hospitality industry, like many others, had concealed extraordinary talents beneath service uniforms, assuming that those with certain accents, colors, or backgrounds were only suited for roles where they remained unseen. Coleman, visibly moved, stood up, leading the room in a thunderous applause, joined by hundreds of employees watching remotely. The applause was not just for Zoe, but for the vision of inclusivity and empowerment. Later that day, in the quiet of her office, Zoe opened an envelope. Inside, she found a postcard from Amsterdam, and a letter from a University of Applied Linguistics offering her a position as a visiting professor. Professor Vanton, who had made that pivotal call in Dutch 6 months prior, had followed her meteoric rise. As Zoe gazed out the window at the bustling city, she couldn't help but reflect. I owe Richards a peculiar thanks for punishing me that day. If she had simply given me, imagine waking up every day to the same four walls, the same routine, the same overlooked dreams. Zoe's life was once like that, but a phone call in Dutch set off a cascade of change that would echo far beyond the confines of a hotel room or the industry itself. With her new salary, Zoe launched a scholarship fund for hotel employees and their children, igniting a beacon of hope for many. The first to feel this warmth was the daughter of Zoe's former cleaning colleague, a young woman with dreams of studying hotel management. But this was more than just a scholarship. It was a clarion call. What is the world missing? Opportunities and recognition for talent that exists in every corner, every shadow. True justice isn't merely about punishing the prejudiced, but about reconstructing systems so thoroughly that prejudice has no dark corner to lurk in. Zoe's sweetest victory was not in seeing her adversaries falter, but in watching countless others like her rise, flourish, and redefine success. If this tale of transformation and silent battles has stirred something within you, if it has made you ponder the unseen barriers to greatness, leave a comment, share your thoughts, your stories, or simply your support. And please like, share, and subscribe to our channel with more narratives of courage and change. Together, let's keep the doors of opportunity wide open, not just for Zoe, but for all who follow in her footsteps. Thank you for joining us on this journey, for your comments, and for your continued support. Here's to a world where everyone has the chance to shine,